A spiritual awakening is mandatory.
Life can be a contradiction.
But it doesn't have to be a lie.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Contradiction with myself, Bernard Alvarez, and Roxy Lopez. We developed this series to help share some ideas and some topics that relate to us not only as spiritual individuals, but as activists and those involved and concerned about the world around us today. Today, Roxy and myself are going to be talking about GMOs and the contradiction associated with those of us who are still buying them. So, without further ado, let me bring Roxy Lopez into the discussion. And Roxy, this is something that I know we're both very, how should we say, passionate about. I think that we both agree that they've made it almost impossible for anybody not to buy GMOs. But let's hear what you have to say about this particular contradiction that we're dealing with in our society today.
Yes, again, we're back to education. In our country, and you mentioned it in the last series, GMOs, the corporation Monsanto, has been given free rein in our country for quite some time. This isn't anything new. I think we're just discovering it in the last decade, more so in the last couple of years. It's really come to the forefront of our information grab. I'll say this again, this is great news. Everything we've talked about in this series of Contradiction is coming to light. These are many topics that are coming to light now, which is only more proof that we are waking up to the ideas of this 3D matrix around us, whatever you want to call it. In particular, GMOs, the AMA came out and said, you can't label the foods GMOs, when they were trying to get the GMOs just at least on the food. So at least you know which foods have GMOs in them and which of them don't. I think part of the reason for that as well with the FDA and the AMA is that because there's so much cross-contamination in GMOs, not only in the fields, but in the equipment they use at the plants, I don't think they can say anything doesn't have GMOs in it in this country anymore. I mean, I'm telling you the truth. From cross-pollination in the organic fields all the way to something that's in a can, let's say, because the equipment's not washed or there's no regulations, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So it seems like the blend is starting to happen. Now, on top of that, there's the cost. The cost of GMOs is fairly cheap compared to the cost of organic. Why? Because the organic licensing and what organic farmers have to do and coalitions that they're in just to stay above board is now becoming costly, very costly. The contradiction. You and I go to the supermarket, and I have done it and you have done it. We have purchased food. Sometimes I just look at it and I say, well, it's all in a row. It's lettuce and carrots and this and that. And there's the organic. Well, the bag of carrots that doesn't say they're GMO or not is, 69 cents. And then the bag of organic carrots is $2.50. And I have a budget. Which one am I going to buy? I'm not dying. My children aren't dying. I get in denial and say, maybe GMOs aren't so bad. I mean, gosh, look at those giant apples.
Yep.
You get big, giant fruit when you are a GMO fruit. And then you see a commercial from Monsanto, and it says they're feeding the world. Bringing food to parts of the world that didn't have droughts, and so they're making drought-resistant seeds. And so your head kind of turns and you say, well, gosh, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's not all that bad. At the end of the day, you feel contradiction inside of your own soul because you're like, God, I have kids, and I just talked to a neighbor and they were telling me about the, GMOs again. God, I'm starting to feel guilty. starting to feel like, God, I'm feeding my kids GMO everything, I think. We have no labeling, though. So how do I know it's GMO? We go back and forth and back and forth. Again, education. There are GMO coalitions. In other words, what do we believe? The worst thing we could do, though, is feel guilty and be in that state of contradiction with our own lives. Don't do it. Don't go there. It's not going to help you. It just stresses you out. It stresses me out. We have to be able to augment and attitude adjust and say, okay, so I buy GMO carrots. That's what I'm doing today. That's the best I can do. In the meantime, what would you like to do? Would you like to get on the anti-Monsanto bandwagon? Well, there's many coalitions. You can go to the GIC website. You can go to the Truth Denied website, put in GMO in the search engine, and you can find out all kinds of stuff. And you can participate wherever you want, locally, if you like. Be a part of the movement to improve our food quality, and maybe that will help you. But certainly don't lose sleep at night in this contradiction that you're in because you're buying GMOs, yet you're on Facebook every day going, GMOs are poison. Think about it, people. Get clear with yourself. Clean your own house first. Okay? If you're anti-GMOs and you're complying with purchasing, just get real with it. That's all. And become part of a movement that will make a difference with our food. This is all about control
30 seconds.
over the food. So with that in mind, control over the food, use your voice, join a coalition. In the meantime, of course, I don't expect anyone to spend $150 a day on food when they can spend 10 or 20. That's all there is to it. I'm sorry. That's the way I feel about it. If health issues come up, then I suppose we have to deal with those as we go. But we do what we can each day. We do something a little different. Back to you, Bernard.
Absolutely. And, one of the terms that I use, and I love everything you just said, it's so important for us not to be so hard on ourselves. We actually showed a documentary today about health and about well-being, and the reality of it is that if you're thinking negative thoughts, you're going to perpetuate disease within your own body. So if you're having this inner conflict, this guilt of buying something that is not labeled and you're not sure whether it's a GMO or not, you're only going to perpetuate the disease cycle. I say something very often, and it's called harm reduction. Do your best to create harm reduction in your purchases. I'm on a budget. I'm on a very strict budget when it comes to food. And when I go shopping, yes, I will. I don't eat a lot of lettuce. I hate to say it. I love my meats and whatnot. So I'm not a big salad eater. However, because I don't eat a lot of lettuce, I'll make sure I'll spend that extra $1 on organic, non-GMO lettuce because it'll last me a week. On other things, I can't be sure. I mean, my goodness, if you've ever been to the organic, non-GMO aisle of meat, it's sometimes triple of what a regular steak or a regular piece of chicken would be. And I know, it's heartbreaking what goes on in these factory farms. I know it's heartbreaking what goes on in these chicken factories and whatnot. It is very, very heartbreaking. And it seems like right now they've got us by the you-know-what. Because either you're going to pay $6 for 3 chicken breasts or you're going to pay $20 for 3 chicken breasts. And the way the economy is and the way that the economy has collapsed, and I believe it's all been done intentionally, we are literally slaves to these GMO and these harmful practices of developing meats and vegetables and whatnot. Now, the good, again, back to the harm reduction. I can buy literally local, organic, locally created eggs for $3 a dozen. I'd rather spend the $3 a dozen for eggs. I'd rather spend $2 for a head of lettuce. Things like that I'm not going to eat every day. So find little corners that you can cut. And what I mean by corners that you can cut in the harm that GMO can create for you, and be satisfied with that. This is not something that is going to be changing overnight. This is not something that we can just get rid of. Let's say that tomorrow we have banned GMOs. Let's say we banned them. Let's say that Monsanto's been dismantled. Let's say that there's no more production of GMO seeds. Let's say there's no more production of harmful chicken raising or beef production. Let's say that all happens. It's still going to be there. Like Roxy said, and the reality of it is, if you know anything about GMO, they have cross-pollinated with a lot of the seeds. Whether you like it or not, I mean, look at vegetarianism. 80% of soy product are genetically modified. How many of your vegetarian friends are eating soy product, whether it be tofu, tofurkey, or that other, I don't know what they call it, seitan? All that stuff is made from genetically modified organisms. You can become vegan and you're still going to be susceptible to genetically modified organisms, Roundup resistant genes, Frankenfish, Frankenmeat, all of these things. It is going to be a process, and it's going to take decades, if not generations, to remove it. So unless you are growing your own meats, unless you are growing your own seed to bushel, I guess is the term to use, that you're growing your own vegetables and your own fruits, the reality of it is you are eating GMO whether you like it or not. There is a contradiction. There is a huge contradiction. I'm against GMO. I'm against harmful factory farming practices. I am for, compassionate farming, compassionate meat production. I am for non-GMO and non-genetically modified vegetables. I am not going to perpetuate or promote Monsanto or anybody who supports it. However, I'm very real in the idea that I am eating GMOs sometimes. Now, again, harm reduction. Cut out the high fructose corn syrup. Cut out the saccharin. Cut out the aspartame. Cut out, buy that $2 head of lettuce instead of the 69-cent head of lettuce. Buy the $3 fresh eggs that are non-GMO fed, no GMO corn fed for $3. A dollar here and a dollar there to help reduce eventually shows the market. Now, unfortunately, this is where we're at right now. They speak money. They speak money. And if you stop buying their product and they see that, oh wow, non-GMO organic lettuce is spiking, people are buying it left and right, they're going to start creating more of it. They, the corporations, they, Monsanto, they, the farmers and distributors, are going to acknowledge your non-compliance. The worst thing that we can do is not care. The worst thing that we can do is not to make an effort. The worst thing that we can do is ignore the problem. The worst thing we can do is not read the labels. Read the labels. Learn what every ingredient is. If you can't pronounce the ingredient, I put it back on the shelf. There's probably 5 products I buy that I don't know how to read the label. It may be GMO, but I know every ingredient that's in it. So that's a start. Harm reduction. Don't feel guilty. There is a contradiction going on here. We know that. We know that. You know that. How many of you that are against Monsanto, have marched against Monsanto, are literally 100% GMO free in your diet? I would say maybe 2%. So we need to be careful and be realistic in this struggle. The struggle is not one that's going to change overnight. The struggle is not one that may change in our own lifetime. But we must make a lifetime commitment to create change for the future. And that starts with harm reduction in our own purchases, harm reduction in our own diet. Roxy, it is such a huge contradiction And as I said a little bit now on how to kind of reconcile that, what are your ideas how to reconcile this contradiction?
Well, it's to be proactive. And, if you have the ability to grow some of your own herbs in your kitchen, or
Besides the
your
kind Terry Joyce likes to grow.
That's right. That's why I'm laughing. And or some tomato plants from purchase the seeds from heirloom companies. Thank goodness that heirloom seed companies are doing co-ops and everything. Trading heirloom seeds with each other. Some people are even trading seeds. So like Barbara Peterson out in Oregon, her farm, everything she grows is from heirloom, organic, non-pesticide, and non-GMO. And then she goes to a food bank, and she's one of the people that has established this food bank, this seed bank, I should say. Sorry.
Good.
And well, seeds translate into
We got 20
food.
seconds.
But so with that in mind, all right, there are many proactive ways. Again, you can go to either one of our websites to find the information of what you can do to become proactive in your contradiction with food and the quality of the food that you eat and feed to your family. Remember,
Life is a contradiction.
but it doesn't have to be a lie. We'll see you next week.
Bye now. Myself, Bernard Alvarez, and Roxy Lopez, we developed this series to help share some ideas and some topics that relate to us not only as spiritual individuals, but as activists and those involved and concerned about the world around us today. Today, Roxy and myself are going to be talking about GMOs and the contradiction associated with those of us who are still buying them. So, without further ado, let me bring Roxy Lopez into the discussion. And Roxy, this is something that I know we're both very, how should we say, passionate about. I think that we both agree that they've made it almost impossible for anybody not to buy GMOs. But let's hear what you have to say about this particular contradiction that we're dealing with in our society today.
Yes, again, we're back to education. In our country, and you mentioned it in the last series, a spiritual awakening is mandatory,
Life can be a contradiction.
but it doesn't have to be a lie.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Contradiction with
GMOs, the corporation Monsanto, has been given free reign in our country for quite some time. This isn't anything new. I think we're just discovering it in the last decade, more so in the last couple of years. It's really come to the forefront of our information grab. I'll say this again, this is great news.